Hello, welcome to part two. Part two of the Acme Excel spreadsheet lesson. And on your screen, you should have open your Acme Excel worksheet that we started from the part one video. And it should look just like this, just like what's on the screen. So all the text and the data in the cells should match mine. And what we are going to do now is we're going to look at some of the great functions of a spreadsheet to help us do a lot of calculating that we don't really want to do by hand, and that's kind of the purpose of the spreadsheet. Then we will format this around and have a little fun with it. It might take another video after this one. We'll see what happens here. But I think the first thing that I would like to do is show you how we can use the formula functions to do the calculating for things that would be important for us to know. For example, here we have the names of the salesmen: Mo, Larry, Curly, Joe, and Chip. And we might want to know how much all of the January sales are. Okay, so they had Mo sold 200, Larry sold 100, and on down the line. Now this math is pretty simple, and we could do this in our head probably, but typically the data in the cells are not quite as friendly as these numbers are. So that's where the spreadsheets can do the work for us. So if you click your cell B10, you want to have B10 is your active cell. Click in there, and if you click, you can double click in the cell, or you can actually click up in this area right here. Either one is programming that particular cell for you. So I'll double click in the cell right here. Now whenever you want to do a math formula, you always want to start with an equal sign. Okay, so type in equal sign, and what we're going to do is we're going to add, we want to tell the spreadsheet to add this column from Mo down to Shimp. So the key word there is S-U-M, sum. Now you see it pops up on the screen right there, and then after you do that, you can, now what I did right there is I hit enter, and you see it says hashtag name question mark. So something is wrong. What it's doing is it's telling you you haven't told the spreadsheet what numbers that you want to add. So I'm going to double click in there again. So you see it just popped right back where it says equal sum. You have to do a parenthesis. You have to open a parenthesis, which is Shift 9. You hit Shift 9, and then you see this kind of weird looking thing where it says number 1, comma, number 2, and you have to tell it which cells you want to add, or which group of cells. Now this is really simple. At this point, you can just click on the cells and drag the area that you want to add. So I'm going to go, while that is blinking there, I'm going to click on the 200, hold, and I'm going to drag it down, and notice what is happening in my box. It says B5, and it has a colon B9 right here, and what it's doing is it's telling you that it's going to add those numbers, and I'm going to hit Shift, and I'm going to hit the parenthesis, which is Shift 0. Close that parenthesis. Now I'm going to hit the enter sign, and that should say 1500, and what it did was that just added those numbers in that area that I selected. And you can change this if you wanted to. Let's say you had another salesman come in, you could insert him in there and it would kind of change it. You would have to, if you double clicked on this, click, it would appear again, and you could just change the B5 to B9 to include all the cells that you wanted to add. Okay, if you get that, hit enter again, and it will go back to the way it was. You have to be careful when you double click in here. If you start clicking around on other cells, it's going to think you're telling it to add. So if something weird like that happens on your spreadsheet and you have trouble clearing it, just call me over and I'll help you get it fixed back to where it was. But this cell right here, it should say B5 colon B9. And when that's up, always hit enter when you're done. Don't click off into another cell. Hit enter, and then it'll go back to the way it was. And then what we want to do, another thing we might be interested in doing is figuring out what the average is. But before I show you that, I think what I'll do is I'm going to click over here on C10, and let's do the sum for these these other two columns here. So click, hit equal sign, sum, click and drag, Whoops, that didn't work. Okay, so what happened was I didn't put the parenthesis. Did you see that? I didn't put the parenthesis in there. So I'm going to double click on that cell again and hit Shift 9. Make sure that says equal sum parenthesis. Now you click and drag. I wanted you to see that error. It could be a little bit finicky if you don't do things exactly in the order that you're supposed to, and it just confuses the spreadsheet. So I click and I drag C5 to C9, hit enter, and that one should say 1900. Let's go to the last one here, and let's do it one more time. Equal sum, parenthesis, click and drag, close parenthesis, enter, and we have it. Okay, there actually is another trick that we can do to make that work a little bit faster, and I will show you over here, and then I'll show you how to find the average. Okay, I'm going to go over here to Mo total. Before I do that, let me just clarify what you have here. This 1500, that represents all the sales from January. Okay, this 1900 represents all the sales from February, and 2200 is all the sales from March. But let's say I would like to know who's my top salesman. All right, I want to know, well, how many did Mo do? So I want to figure out, I want to add this column up here, but I don't want to add the Mo. I just want to add the 200, the 300, and the 300. Again, the math, this easy math would be simple to do in our head, but rarely are the numbers going to work out this friendly for us, and often these spreadsheets can be huge. So let's double click on cell E5. Okay, again, that's your active cell right there. E5, I want to add up these columns here, so I'm going to hit the equal sign. I'm going to click and drag. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm going to hit sum, parenthesis. I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to close parenthesis, enter. So that tells me 800. Mo sold 800. Now this time I'm going to show you another shortcut, which we could have done over here on the bottom, but I wanted you to practice typing in sum. You notice the bottom corner has a dot, okay, right under the second zero on 800. If you hover over that to where your cursor changes to a plus sign, notice how my cursor changes. See how it's a big, thick plus sign, and it changes to a little skinny black plus sign, not with the arrows on the end. So you have to get it right over that dot, and you have the skinny little plus sign. Click and hold that and drag it down and stop it on the line of Shemp, and then let go. Now notice how those numbers filled in, and what just happened here is it filled in the same formula for the respective row as you went down the page. For example, notice right here where it says 800, right up here it says sum B5 to D5. So it's adding up B5, C5, and D5. It's adding up that row, and that's what it's telling you right there. Hit enter, and if you go down to the next column here, okay, notice that says B6 to D6. So it moved down. It did the same columns. It just moved the rows because of the way I clicked my my screen there. So as I move down, notice how this right here is changing as I slide down. That's B7. All right, hit enter again. And again, don't click off that cell or you're going to get a weird formula thing. It's going to mess up your formula and your number will probably disappear then. And if you get too confused, like I said, call me over and I'll help you get that figured out. And then Shemp's is B9 to D9 because he's in row 9 right there. Okay, so now what I want to do is move to average. Okay, so let me click over here and we will show you how to find the average. Let's say this cell right here, I would like this to show, well, what was the average? In other words, if I took all of the widgets that were sold and divided them equally among the salesmen, what would it be if they all sold the same amount to get 1500? And we could type in the math formula right here, but Excel allows us to use a formula again. So I'm going to double click equal sign. You always start a formula with an equal sign. And I'm going to type in the word average. And you'll see on your screen it should pop up. Okay, and you can type, hit enter, but then you're going to get that name question mark. So if you get that, you're going to have to go back and double click. You have to actually type in the word average what it's doing is it's telling you that these are the words that are different possible formulas, and they can get a little more complicated where you set up commands where if a certain thing happens, you find it, and if it doesn't happen, you don't. We're not going to worry about that. We just want to know what's the average of Mo, Larry, Curly, Joe, and Shemp. Now parentheses. So you have equals, average, parenthesis. All right, now again, we want to select the range that we want to calculate the average. So I'm going to click on Mo. I'm going to drag down and make sure you stop at 300. Because at 300, that's the end of the salesman. Remember that last column, row D, the last row, row D, that is the totals right there. And we don't want to include that into the average. We just want the salesman included. Now close your parentheses, so it should say equals average B5 to B9. Again, you can look right here. That should match what it says. Now hit enter, and the average, if we divided all of those sales up amongst it, each salesman would have 300 apiece. Okay, now we can use our trick that we did with the total over here by clicking on that bottom right hand corner, and watch the plus sign change from the big white one to the little thin one. Click and drag that only over to March. And what it's going to do, it's going to take the same formula that we started with, which was average of B5 to B9. Okay, now as I move over, I'm going to hit my arrow key. Whoops, hit enter. I'm going to click over here in this cell. That's average of C5 to C9. So it's found the same range. It just jumped over the column. And the same thing right here. So if I want to go now, the last piece I might need is to find the average of this column right here. So we're going to do that next. So let's click on cell, if you're not on cell F5, F5 is right there. If you're in the right spot, click on that cell there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing we did over here. We want to now find what was the average sales for Mo over the months. In other words, he sold a total of 800. So we want to know if you divided that up to each month, how many per month would he have sold? That's our average. So again, double click in that cell, or you can click up in the white box up there and you type in equals and type in average, parenthesis, and let's click the range, and you're only going to click the months, not the total right there. So it should say B5 colon D5, close that parenthesis right there and hit enter. So you get that weird looking number right there. Click back. That's the right number. It had to round it off because it's not an equal number of widgets sold every month. So it's just it's not rounded off, but it's got a decimal value in there. So go to the right hand bottom corner, click, drag only down to where it says to Shemp's, which is row 9, release, and you get all of these weird looking numbers right here. So the first thing we ought to do is do some formatting, but I think because of the length of the video, I'm going to begin formatting on my next video here after this one. So your screen should look something like that, and when you come back, we will do some formatting and make this look a little bit more professional, and we will go from there.